When I was 10 years old, my family was wiped out in a massacre to ensure no one was left behind. The killers were ruthless, sparing not even the livestock. Every boy hiding was dragged out and killed. They even shook the eggs until the yolks broke. They sliced earthworms in half lengthwise. They even poured boiling water into the ant hills. Finally, they discovered me, a pretty little girl. Through a crack in the rockery, I watched with my own eyes as my 4 brothers were found one by the masked killers and dragged to the center of the courtyard. The leader, in black, deliberately took out a piece of candy and a dagger, making them choose. My eldest brother, trembling all over, chose the dagger. The man in black said coldly, "This boy has a killer's heart. He must not be left alive." My second brother, pale as a sheet, chose the candy. The man in black said coldly, "This boy is too calculating. He must not be left alive." My third brother, hesitant and indecisive, simply took both. The man in black said coldly, "This boy is too greedy. He must not be left alive." My fourth brother chose neither. The man in black said coldly, "This boy has a rebellious spirit. He must not be left alive." My fourth brother, resigned to death, cursed the man in black at the top of his lungs. "If you can't kill me today, I swear, I will tear you to pieces." The man in black clapped and laughed. "Such spirit. Since you are the only bloodline left of Magistrate Jiang, I might as well give you a chance for revenge. Boy, the next time we meet, I will kill you with my own hands." With that, he turned and walked away with his men, leaving my fourth brother stunned. My fourth brother, in utter disbelief, realizing he had truly escaped with his life, wept for joy on the spot. But the man in black suddenly turned back, his eyes filled with the malicious joy of toying with prey. "Boy, we meet again." My fourth brother, having just returned from the gates of hell, froze, his expression caught between tears and laughter. He glanced toward where I was hiding, and bolted toward the gate. But after only a few steps, he was captured by the man in black. I hid in the small crevice of the rockery, clamping my hand over my mouth, tears streaming down my face, not daring to make a single sound. I watched as the man in black pulled his sword from my brother, wiped the blood off on the fallen body, and ordered in a flat tone, "Clean them all out. Let's go." The killers retreated as silently as they had arrived. The entire courtyard fell into a deathly silence. Only then did I dare to let go, gasping for air. I wanted to go out and see if anyone else was alive, to collect the bodies of my parents and brothers, but when I remembered the way the man in black had toyed with them, that mocking look in his eyes, a strong sense of danger rose in my heart. So I did not go out. Not long after, light footsteps echoed in the courtyard again. The masked killers had returned. Seeing the courtyard still in the state they had left it, one of the killers said to the man in black, "Master, perhaps you were wrong." The man in black kicked my fourth brother's body. "Impossible. That boy was clearly trying to lead us away. There must be a survivor here." The man in black's sharp gaze scanned the courtyard. Suddenly he strode toward the rockery. My heart hammered wildly, and I curled my body as tightly as I could in the cramped space. But I still accidentally looked through the stone crack, meeting the malicious eyes behind his mask. He suddenly smiled. "You hid better than your brothers." I was dragged out from the rockery and forced to my knees before the man in black. Only then did I see the carnage in the courtyard. Under the pale, ghostly moonlight, my father hung from my mother's favorite paulownia tree. My mother, her clothes torn to shreds, lay on her back in the nearby pavilion, her lower body a mangled, bloody mess, her wide, lifeless eyes fixed toward my father. The heads of my nanny and the old steward had been placed upon the swing set. As the cold wind blew against the swing, the two heads swayed slowly up and down, blood dripping from their severed necks onto the grass. Not a single servant in the house was spared. Even my big yellow dog, who grew up by my side, had been gutted and disemboweled. I knew I wouldn't survive either. Wu Neng looked up and glared fiercely at the man in black. The scent of blood on him, mixed with a distinct aroma of ambergris, rushed toward me, making me feel sick to my stomach. Yet he did not kill me, nor did he make me choose between candy and a dagger like he did with my 4 brothers, making me choose between candy and a dagger just because I was a little girl. For many years afterward, I would always think back to the strange look the man in black gave me. Contemptuous, amused, vicious. It was as if he were looking at a toy he could manipulate at will. He stopped his subordinate from finishing me off and said with a meaningful look, "A little girl can't stir up any trouble. Keeping her alive is more interesting than killing her." The man in black was right to look down on me, a helpless little girl, let alone seeking revenge, would find it nearly impossible just to survive in these chaotic times. From the day my family met its tragic end, the world showed me nothing but malice. The authorities hastily ruled my family's massacre as the work of thieves. I accidentally overheard a conversation between the prefect and his secretary. Master Jiang offended someone he shouldn't have, a lowly imperial physician daring to speak out of turn. He deserved to end up like this. Now that the Jiang men are all dead, there is only a pretty little girl left. She can't possibly turn things around. So, The authorities were completely unreliable. As for the Jiang family relatives, not one of them stood up to seek justice for us. Instead, they scrambled to seize my family's property. Just because I am a girl, the law says I cannot inherit the estate. I wasn't even allowed to perform the funeral rites for my father. They even openly discussed selling me off right there in the morning hall. That they should sell me off. Why don't we take her back and raise her? Just give her some scraps to eat. When she grows up, we can marry her off and get a dowry. A distant aunt, looking at me with pity, discussed this with her husband. What nonsense are you spouting? Her family offended a powerful figure. Stop sticking your nose where it doesn't belong. My aunt didn't dare say another word. She turned around to negotiate the price with the human trafficker. Another shifty-eyed neighbor chimed in from the side. Why sell her as a maid? If something happens later, it'll implicate you. Better to sell her to a brothel. You'll make a bit more money that way. As he finished speaking, he lecherously sized me up from head to toe. I stood there motionless, staring blankly. Even when the human traffickers took me away, I didn't struggle, because I knew that resisting would only lead to a worse death. Perhaps it was because I acted so obedient along the way, even offering to serve tea and water to the traffickers, or perhaps just because I was a frail little girl. The traffickers had no guard against me. So, when the carriage stopped for a rest, I took advantage of the trafficker being drunk and offered to clean up his vomit. Once he fell asleep, I quietly hid in a cargo wagon and escaped. At daybreak, I was discovered by the driver. Whose child is this? As soon as the driver shouted, I jumped off the carriage immediately and ran desperately into the crowd. From that day on, I became a little beggar in the city. This little girl is quite a beauty. I slapped his hand away and took off running as fast as I could. I smeared dirt all over my face. I rolled on the ground to make my clothes filthy and tattered. Only then did I look like a real beggar. To survive, I knelt before a food stall begging desperately, only to be heartlessly driven away. Go on, get out of here. Don't get in the way of my business. I couldn't beg for a single bite of food. Seeing a stray dog snatching a leftover bun from a customer, I gritted my teeth and lunged to fight the dog for it, drawing laughter from the passers-by. Having finally snatched half a bun, I was immediately targeted by other beggars. I could only clutch the bun and run frantically toward the potter's field. I endured the excruciating pain of the beggar's fists and kicks, clinging tightly to the hard-won bun in my hands. I thought I was going to die right there. When I opened my eyes again, I was lying on a soft couch. Second miss, she is awake. A gentle figure walked in. It was Liu Ruyue, the daughter of Chancellor Liu. So, it was she who had rescued me from the pile of beggars. The next day, Prime Minister Liu adopted me as his foster daughter. I was renamed Liu Ruyue. To the world, I was the third young lady of the Liu estate. I lived in a grand mansion, attended by countless servants. I remained deeply guarded, not understanding why the Prime Minister would take in a beggar. I only learned later that it was because I resembled the Liu family's eldest daughter, Liu Ruyue, who had passed away early. But I don't care. I only want to survive and avenge the entire Jiang family. The Prime Minister and my second sister, Liu Yunwu, treat me very well. Second sister taught me music, chess, calligraphy, and painting, but I told her I wanted to study medicine and poisons instead. Without a second thought, she found me renowned masters. I have absolutely no interest in saving lives. I turned all the medicinal herbs in the backyard into lethal toxins. When the plague arrived, I poisoned the rats. The wild dogs are howling. I poisoned the wild dogs. The crows are cawing. So I use poisonous insects. Corpses often lie across the courtyard. The servants avoid me like the plague. Only my second sister praises me every time. No one can hurt you now. I maintain a stern expression, but my ears turned red in secret. Yet, those peaceful days didn't last long. The heir to the Marquis of Linen came to propose. My second sister was married off in a grand ceremony. Before leaving, she urged me to take good care of myself. Although I couldn't bear to see her go, I only wished for her safety. After all, I had already embarked on a path of revenge, and we were bound to go our separate ways sooner or later. Who would have thought that my second sister would leave this world before me? She had only been married for half a year. When news of the tragedy reached us from the Marquise's estate, my second sister had died of an illness. I was struck as if by lightning. I refused to believe this was an accident. I knelt before the Prime Minister, looking at his hair, now turned completely white, and said in a cold, icy tone, "Father, I want to marry into the second prince's estate. You help him seize the throne. I will uncover the truth for my sister, for the Liu family, and for the Jiang family. I beg you, Father, grant my wish." Half a month later, the Prime Minister's third daughter was betrothed to the second prince, Li Heng. As his secondary consort, I was married into the second prince's estate with great splendor, but I never imagined that, on the night of our wedding, the moment I saw Li Heng, I recognized him as the man in black who slaughtered my entire family. My face flushed with rage, but Li Heng mistook it for shyness. After we finished the wedding wine, he swept me up into his arms and laid me on the bed. I was trembling with fury, but Li Heng gave a wicked smile. "Don't worry. Prime Minister Liu is very loyal, and I will never treat you poorly." He gently caressed my cheek, seemingly very satisfied with my appearance. "Once you have a child in the future, I will surely grant you a glorious future." From then on, I could only suppress my disgust and submit to Li Heng's possession until the break of dawn. When Li Heng finally left, the person I was waiting for had finally arrived. The door was gently knocked upon. A woman with a stern expression walked in. She was the mentor my sister had found for me before, and now she had become my dowry attendant. "Aunt Tao, is what I asked for ready?" Aunt Tao looked pained, but she did not stop me. She handed me a porcelain jar containing 2 plump goo insects. "Feed them with your blood every night at midnight and never let them see the light." After watching me seal the jar, Aunt Tao took out a light purple incense stick and lit it. "This is floating life dream. It makes one dream of the person they miss most. Use it for 1 month straight, and a person will no longer distinguish dreams from reality." Why did the second prince exterminate the entire Jiang family? Because imperial physician Jiang discovered the crown prince wasn't born simple-minded, but had been poisoned. After hearing the second prince's personal guard say this, I instantly understood the whole truth. The things the prime minister once lamented in his study now surfaced in my mind, every word clear as day. Although the first prince died from an accidental fall into the river, the second prince was never favored by the emperor. The emperor's health is failing day by day, yet he refuses to name a crown prince. The imperial court is bound to fall into chaos. I used to think it was just imperial maneuvering and the unpredictability of the court, but only now did I suddenly realize all of this, from beginning to end, was a death trap set by the second prince. He poisoned the crown prince, removing his greatest obstacle, then killed imperial physician Jiang to silence him, covering up all the evidence. Then, he secretly won over the officials, hoping the emperor would name him crown prince. Perhaps even the emperor's illness and my sister's death. Every single event was orchestrated by him. I clenched my fists tightly, my nails digging deep into my palms. The taste of blood spread in my mouth. Fortunately, Aunt Cao appeared just in time, helped me clean up the incense ash, and brought me back to my room, so my identity was not exposed. Half a year later, the emperor passed away. The second prince, Li Heng, ascended the throne as emperor. The man who once promised me a bright future took Zhao Yining, the legitimate daughter of the Marquis of Linan, as his wife, and named her Empress. I only received the title of noble consort, but I didn't care about that at all, though I still had to put on a show. I knelt down submissively to receive the decree. Seeing me so obedient, the emperor was deeply moved and came to my palace that very night. I served him food myself and picked up the pipa he had carved with his own hands, playing the tune he used to love the most. As the strings were plucked, the gentle melody echoed through the hall. Li Heng closed his eyes, looking completely intoxicated. Your skills are as good as ever." I blushed slightly, lowered my head, and smiled, while feeling utter disgust in my heart. That night, the emperor stayed in my palace. The next day I went to pay my respects to the empress. As soon as I entered the hall, I felt the oppressive atmosphere. The empress sat upright on her phoenix throne, slowly stirring her tea lid, and swept her gaze over me. A faint but biting smile curled at the corner of her mouth. "Sister, your complexion has improved quite a bit. Looking at the spring in your eyes, I suppose. The emperor must have slept very comfortably in your palace last night." She paused, her voice not loud, yet every word was piercing. "Some people should not forget their place. Don't forget who is the true mistress of this inner palace." I stood below with my head bowed, listening to her cold taunts, but I didn't care at all. The empress thought I wanted to vie for favor, but I had no interest in the emperor whatsoever. However, his favor is necessary. It is merely a stepping stone on my path of revenge. Not long after, the empress and I both became pregnant. She gave birth to a princess. I gave birth to a prince. So I swapped the 2 children. Everyone in the palace laughed at my misfortune. Despite being the emperor's first woman, I couldn't become the empress. And even after finally getting pregnant, I couldn't even bear a prince. What use is a princess? Almost everyone was waiting to see me make a fool of myself. The night I gave birth, Li Heng looked at me, his tone filled with joy. You've given me a princess. Do you know how happy I am?" The emperor, who usually kept his emotions hidden, was as happy as a child in front of me right now. He smiled and added that the princess's features were beautiful, just like yours. I leaned against the couch and smiled faintly. "The princess is still so young. How can you even tell?" I curled my lips, hiding mockery in my eyes. If Li Heng truly cared about me, how could he not see that the child looks nothing like me at all? These are just comforting words to make up for what he owes the Liu family. Li Heng looked down at the baby girl in the swaddling clothes, his handsome face filled with tenderness. Li Heng looked at the baby girl gently and spoke slowly. "I have already decided. Our princess shall be named Li Kangxing, with the title Lening. According to ancestral tradition, princesses are only granted titles after their first month. Because of the emperor's favoritism, this child received such an honor the moment she was born. Named Kangxing, titled Lening, carrying the emperor's endless expectations." Li Heng pulled me into his arms, and everyone tactfully withdrew. Li Heng looked down at me and asked softly, Do you like the name I chose? Li Heng's chest was very warm, as he kept saying that he wanted to give Lenning the best things in the world. I feigned being moved, and nodded gently. Your servant likes it. Thank you, your majesty. But my heart was cold as ice. Li Heng came to see Lenning almost every day. He brought gifts every time, as if he wanted to offer all the treasures in the storehouse to the princess. After a long time, I deliberately pretended to be unhappy. Your majesty, how can you neglect the prince for the princess? You should go see the eldest prince more often. In truth, Li Heng came so often that I was also very annoyed. Whenever Li Heng came, I had to play the doting mother and accompany him to play with the child. Even though I felt extreme disgust inside, I still had to pretend to be happy on my face. It was truly exhausting. When Li Heng wasn't around, Lenning was taken care of by a wet nurse in the side hall. When there is nothing going on, don't bring him to me. The palace servants nodded in agreement, thinking I favored boys over girls and disliked Lenning for not being a prince. Only I knew that Lenning was not my child at all. I had swapped the two children. He was the one the Empress gave birth to. So whenever Li Heng came again, I would urge him to go to the Empress's palace to see the prince I had given birth to. Li Heng looked very guilty and sighed softly as he looked at me. I have wronged you. I lowered my eyes and said nothing. What he has done to me is far more than just a wrong. Li Heng wiped out my entire Jiang family. Even if I have to go to hell, I will drag him down there with me. The Empress and I finished our month of confinement. For the prince and princess's first month celebration, Li Heng granted amnesty to the world to pray for the children's blessings. At the palace banquet, I saw the prince I had given birth to, Li Heng. He named him Li Peng. The tender and delicate Li Peng was held in the Empress's arms, his pair of eyes wide open, watching the palace servants coming and going, giggling from time to time. Noblewomen and court ladies crowded around to offer their flattery. The Empress beamed with pride, looking at me with a smug expression. Her eyes were filled with provocation and mockery. Not long after the full-month banquet, the ministers began to grow restless. They argued that to stabilize the nation, the emperor should name the eldest prince as the crown prince. Li Heng had only one son, Li Peng. Whether by right of birth or seniority, Li Peng was the rightful heir. When Li Heng came to see me, he rubbed his temples wearily and looked at me, asking, what do you think? I feigned ignorance, lowering my head gently. The inner court must not interfere in state affairs. I dare not casually discuss matters of the state, your majesty. Li Heng's gaze was deep, staring at me thoughtfully for a long time. Finally he sighed, asking in a voice filled with helplessness and sorrow, do you resent me? I forced a bitter smile, shaking my head gently. I have never resented your majesty. Yet, the hatred in my heart made my eyes sting with tears. Not long after, the 1-year-old Li Peng was named crown prince. Listening to the commotion from the Qingqing palace, I felt strangely calm. Whether I become empress or not is unimportant. What matters is that my son must be the crown prince. Ever since Li Peng was named crown prince, the empress has been completely satisfied, full of arrogance, often bringing Penger to my palace to show him off. The empress held my son, her tone dripping with vanity. The noble consort has been favored for so many years yet failed to bear a prince. I sympathize with your maternal heart, so I specifically asked the emperor to bring Penger to visit you more often. I knew the empress's intentions all too well. She did this merely to see me consumed by envy and jealousy, hoping I would lose my composure, commit a grave mistake, and give her the chance to get rid of me. Unfortunately, the empress did not know that her actions were exactly what I needed. On the surface, I spoke with a sour, envious tone, letting the empress indulge herself. Then I am truly grateful for the kindness of your majesty and the empress. I only hope that I too may be blessed enough to bring more children and fortune to the emperor. In reality, my heart was filled with immense relief. Penger is my child, and I long to see him every single day. However, the nights in the deep palace are long, and I often dream of Penger crying to me, asking why I abandoned him and why I poisoned him. Mother, why did you abandon me? I shook my head while weeping. It was not that I didn't want him. It was the hatred that wouldn't let me go. That is right. On the night Li Peng was born, I infected him with the 1,000-bone goo. This GEU is incredibly sinister. It must be nourished with the mother's vital blood for a long time before being planted into the child's body. Usually, it remains dormant, but once a designated person has skin-to-skin contact with the child, the GEU will automatically transfer, parasitizing the designated person. It devours the heart and pulse every day. At first, it only causes weakness and fatigue, but it grows increasingly severe, until finally they die bleeding from all 7 orifices, and no one can ever find the cause. They simply assume it was death from overwork. As for the emperor and empress who held Li Peng daily, they had long since been infected with the 1,000-bone GEU. Within just a month, the poison began to take effect. The empress was the first to collapse. In the morning, while holding Li Peng to nurse, her fingers would tremble uncontrollably. Her heart felt as if it were being gnawed by thousands of insects, causing her to break into a cold sweat. Often, She would curl up on the floor in pain halfway through. Her face was as pale as paper, and even her lips lost all color. The imperial physicians took turns treating her, but their pulses only showed a deficiency of blood and energy, a lack of vital essence, no matter how they adjusted the prescriptions. And despite the countless nourishing decoctions she drank, her symptoms only grew worse. At night, she was often jolted awake by sharp pains in her heart, wailing incessantly. The Empress's former majesty was completely gone. Until the day he died, he never imagined that the legitimate son he cherished day and night was actually a lethal weapon claiming his life. Every day of intimate contact was only accelerating his own death. The poison in Li Heng took effect more slowly, but it was far more vicious. At first it was just dizziness while reviewing memorials, a lack of energy, and an inability to wake from afternoon naps. Later, it progressed to coughing up blood and muscle spasms, occasionally even falling into a coma. Sometimes he would mumble, calling out for his mother, and other times he would ramble incoherently, screaming the name of the late emperor. His expression twisted and terrifying. The Thousand Machine Bone and the infamous Thousand Machine Poison of history originate from the same source. In the final stages, the body suffers from rigid muscle spasms, eyes wide open, jaws locked tight, a sight both bizarre and agonizing. Just as the ancient texts recorded, before death, the head and feet curled toward each other, taking the form of a thousand machine trap. The ministers were filled with panic, yet not one of them truly worried for the emperor. After all, Li Heng had long been named crown prince, and a young emperor only gave the ministers more opportunities to climb the ranks. Unfortunately, the Empress's poison had reached her heart, and she died bleeding from all 7 orifices. A miserable end. The palace servants dared not look at her twisted, convulsing form. Once the Empress died, Li Heng became even more distraught, and the poison flared up with increasing frequency until he couldn't even manage to stand. 3 days later, Li Heng's poison erupted completely. Late that night, piercing wails echoed from the Qianqing palace. The servants rushed in at the sound, only to find Li Heng rigid, his body arched and twisted into the shape of a thousand machine trap, blood streaming from his 7 orifices, his face a mask of horror. I ordered all the servants to withdraw, stepping forward alone to admire Li Heng's wretched state. I walked slowly to the dragon bed, looking down at Li Heng from above. Li Heng struggled to call my name. Yue. Quickly, call the imperial physician. I lowered my head, my smile as cold as ice, saying word by word, the physician? Didn't you, your majesty, kill them all already? Li Heng's eyes widened abruptly, frozen in place. What, Yue? I gently stroked Li Heng's face. Your majesty, do you still remember the Jiang family of physicians you wiped out? My father, mother, and brothers all died by your hand. My grandparents' heads were even hung on a swing for your amusement. The entire estate was turned into a river of blood. Even the birds flying overhead were shot down. That day, the ground was littered with corpses, and I was the only 10-year-old girl left of the entire family. Your majesty said at the time that a little girl couldn't stir up any trouble, and that keeping me alive was more interesting than killing me. I caressed Li Heng's cheek. Well, your majesty, do you find it interesting now? Penger and I, mother and son, joined forces to end you with our own hands. I find it extremely interesting. My fingertips pinched his blood-stained chin with force, forcing him to look at me. Li Heng convulsed violently, a rattling sound coming from his throat. His eyes filled with disbelief. The agony of the poison made it nearly impossible for him to speak, yet he mustered his final strength to roar. No, impossible, Penger. He is my legitimate son, born of the Empress. How could you? Legitimate son? Born of the Empress? I laughed even more coldly, the sound echoing through the empty Qianqing palace, filled with endless mockery. Your majesty, you didn't know until the very end, did you? Li Heng, whom you named Crown Prince when he was just 1 year old, is not the Empress's child at all. He is my own biological son, Jiang Yunya's son. Li Heng's pupils contracted sharply, as if his final ounce of strength had been drained away. His body suddenly stiffened. Blood began to pour more heavily from his 7 orifices, staining the imperial robes beneath him red. What did you say? Penger is yours. He is mine, I said, enunciating every word with absolute clarity. The night he was born, I personally swapped him with the Empress's daughter, and using the last of my Jiang family's bloodline as a catalyst, I fed him the 1,000-bone poison. Every day you held him, kissed him, and doted on him, thinking you were loving your own legitimate son, your future heir, but you never knew that every time you touched him, you were personally drawing that poison into your own body. The Empress was the same. She treasured Penger like a jewel, only to die at the hands of her own son, dying without ever knowing why. Isn't it laughable? I leaned down and whispered into his ear, my voice as tender as a lover's vow, yet poisonous to the bone. Your majesty, you once said keeping me alive was interesting. Are you satisfied with how interesting it has become? Li Heng's face twisted in agony and shock. He tried to struggle, tried to raise his hand to choke me, but his muscles were rigid, unable to move even a single finger. He could only force out a desperate wheezing gasp. The blood from his 7 orifices began to congeal. Those eyes that once looked down upon the world, treating human life like blades of grass, remained wide open, filled with terror, regret, and resentment. For the last time, the light in them faded away completely. His body finally fell still. I stood quietly before the dragon bed, looking down at his corpse. No joy, no pity, only a cold, icy calm, endurance and plotting. From the bloodbath when I was 10, to the blood debt repaid today. I had finally done it. Outside the window, the night was pitch black. The palace lanterns flickered, illuminating the bloodstains on my sleeves. From this day forward, Emperor Li Heng is dead. Crown Prince Li Peng, my own son, ascends the throne, and I, Jiang Yunye, as Empress Dowager, will rule from behind the curtain, firmly seated in the deep palace, stabilizing the court for him, clearing out the old officials, and paving his path to imperial power. The world will praise me as a virtuous empress of the ages, saying that even though I am not his biological mother, I loved him deeply and guided him with wisdom. Only I know the truth. This empire was bought with the blood of my kin and a lifetime of sin. Time passed, and in the blink of an eye, 10 years went by. Li Peng grew from an innocent child into a tall, deep-thinking young emperor. He had been sensible since he was small, respectful and filial toward me, relying on me for everything, trusting me. But as he grew older, he began reading the old archives of the late emperor, hearing the private whispers of the palace servants, and while sorting through old belongings once more, he discovered the secret journals left behind by the imperial physicians. Piecing together the truth he feared most, he knew he was not born of the Empress, but was my Jiang Yunye's own son. He knew I had swapped him with the Empress's child. He knew that when he was still an infant, I had planted the 1,000-bone poison in him. He knew that his father, Li Heng, and his foster mother, the Empress, all died because of him, and he knew that my entire Jiang family was cruelly slaughtered by Li Heng, leaving only me alive. That day, Li Peng did not come to pay his respects. When I saw him the next day, the affection in his eyes was gone, replaced only by surging pain and struggle. He looked at me, as if seeing me for the first time. "Mother," Li Peng said, his voice hoarse. "Every word feels like it is dripping with blood. Is all of this true?" I did not hide it, nor was there any need to. I simply nodded gently. He slammed his eyes shut, his body swaying. When he opened them again, they were filled with tears. "You used me while I was still in swaddling clothes against my father, entrusting him to be so kind to me. He was the most loving father in my memory, yet he died because of me." I watched him in his agony, my heart aching faintly. Yet my face remained calm. "He was your father, but he was also the enemy who slaughtered my entire family and killed my dearest kin." Li Peng shook his head in pain, nearly breaking down. I understand your hatred. I understand how much you suffered back then. I am grateful that you protected me as I grew, paved the way for my status, and held up this empire for me. But I also hate you. I hate that you turned me into a tool for revenge. I hate that you used your own flesh and blood to stain your hands with blood. I hate that I was born carrying the sin of patricide." He roared out, tears rolling down. That was the first time I saw him so uncomposed, so desperate. From then on, he became melancholy. In court, he was a steady and majestic emperor, but in the solitude of the night, he was a boy tortured by guilt and hatred. He sympathized with the tragedy of my life and respected my painstaking efforts to assist him. Yet he could not forgive me for using him to take revenge, nor could he accept that he had personally killed the father who loved him. He distanced himself from me, yet he dared not be truly heartless. Between us, mother and son, lay a sea of blood and endless sin. We were inches apart, yet worlds away. The deep palace was silent, no longer holding a shred of warmth. I watched him grow thinner, sleepless night after night, watching him wither away, tortured by the past. I finally understood. The great revenge was achieved. The empire was in hand, but I had ultimately destroyed my only son. This sin, it was time for me to pay for it. That night, I prepared a pot of poisoned wine and sat by the window in plain clothes. When Li Peng rushed in, his expression was panicked. "Mother, you..." I looked up at him, my eyes finally holding a trace of tenderness, a trace of relief. "Penger," I called him softly, "I have repaid the debt to your father. I have taken revenge for the Jiang family, but what I owe you, and what I owe the innocent souls in this palace, must also be repaid." I picked up the wine cup, my fingers trembling slightly. "You don't need to pity me anymore. You don't need to suffer. You don't need to struggle. From now on, you are a clean emperor, unburdened and free." Li Peng's eyes were bloodshot, rushing forward to grab the wine. "Mother, don't," I said, dodging him slightly, and drained the poisoned wine in one gulp. A sharp pain instantly swept through my whole body, exactly the same as the suffering Li Heng endured. I watched him, tears streaming down his face, my voice as light as a sigh. "Do not hate, and do not dwell on it. Be a good emperor. I am off to atone for my sins." As the words fell, I slowly closed my eyes. The deep blood feud of this life has finally been avenged. The only thing I owe is my son. Now, I pay the price with my life, and I have no more regrets.